Welcome back to Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, the city manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. Sorry about the 2 week hiatus here. Happy to be back. Excited to be here in the studio again. Thank you for all the folks who have continued to reach out during the past 2 weeks. And thank you for all of the positive comments about all the wonderful things that are happening in Muskegon Heights. So we want to take advantage of today to announce some good news, some more grant money that is coming to Muskegon Heights. And hopefully we will have a guest joining us today in order to talk about that as part of our water program. Unexpected, but excited to make this announcement. I don't want to steal the thunder and the fire from that, but so we'll wait until she's able to join to be able to talk about that. So just a quick update on things that are the goings ons and happenings in Muskegon Heights. So if you remember, and you've probably heard me say it over and over again, and finally we are here. The demolition and hazardous material abatement has begun at the site on the corner of Peck and Sherman. So we're excited about that. You saw the construction fencing going up. They've already started to remove the asbestos and such materials. And as soon as all the hazardous materials are removed, that's when the big guns come out and we start the demolition of the structure. They're telling me that it should not take more than a couple of weeks in order to bring all of that down and to clear the site. So we are underway. That's the term that I've been using, underway. So excited about that. We were anticipating the kickoff of the housing development. That kickoff was scheduled to occur this past Friday, September 9th. However, due to illness, that has been postponed to October 3rd. So go back and find that spot on your calendar for October 3rd. Reserve that because we will have an intense and immense dog and pony show for you to kick off the start of the first development of homes. We already have a house that's underway on Hume and Jarman, thanks to the Career Technical Education Center and their collaboration with Lake Hawks in Flight. They've already done the demolition on that site. They've already dug a hole to initiate the basement structure. They had a very nice hard hat kickoff yesterday, if you missed that, and that is underway. But this is the housing development, which is multiple houses, anticipated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 29 to 50 homes. And so that kickoff for that first property will be at the intersection of Delano and Ray. And that is the date for October 3rd for that ceremony. And that will include the Chamber of Commerce, the elected officials on the state and local level, as well as hopefully the county, the various organizations across the county that have helped make this a possibility. So it should be a very, very, very exciting event. October 3rd. The exact time is to be determined. It'll either be noon or early afternoon. So wait to get the exact time. I will follow up this show at a future show and be able to give you that exact time. So it's exciting that that's underway. And then our $7 million drinking water revolving loan fund projects that were approved over a year ago as part of the grant application process. We were notified that we received the grant, and grant is not exactly the right word. It's really a $7 million loan that is being funded by bonds issued by specific revenue bonds that are being issued based on the water fund. And a portion of those funds, our what they call loan forgiveness. And that's another fancy way of saying a grant. So out of that $7 million, approximately 5 million of that are 100% loan forgiveness or grant. And so that $5 million worth of grant is going into replacing water lines on the southwest section and lead service lines throughout the city. Now, remember, with the lead service lines, we have an obligation to address at least, what is it, 5% of all the water service lines every year so that we can complete all of the lead service line replacements within 20 years. That's the goal and objective that the state has laid out. And you will remember that mandate did not come with funding for it. So the state is doing a few backflips in order to make grant funds available in order to help assist communities like ours in achieving that objective within the 20-year time frame. So as part of this project that we received the $7 million, we anticipate being able to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 540 of the lead service lines in Muskegon Heights. Now, we have about 3,700, give or take 50 or so lead service line services in Muskegon Heights. And so our goal is to do, in order to meet that requirement, 5%, is to do a minimum of 185 to 190 every year for the next 20 years in order to meet the requirements. Now, I said our goal, but our true goal is really to exceed that so that we can reach that mark of replacing all of our lead service lines as fast as possible, because we know that the sooner we get the lead out, the sooner we increase the health and wellness of our community. Fortunately for us, the metrics that they look at in order to determine health associated with lead leaching into the water system has not been an issue for us like it's been for other communities across the state. So we're in good shape with our water service, but we want to be proactive instead of reactive. We want to make sure that we address these issues, the potential for these issues before they actually become problems. And so, even though the state has given us that mark of 180, 190 a year in terms of our rate of replacement, with this first project, we're going to hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 540, which should put us well ahead of the clock, so to speak, in getting those lead service lines replaced. And so that project, which was approved a year ago for application, that was awarded about 9 months ago, that went through the bonding process over the last 9 months, has finally closed at the state. The bonds have been issued and the funds have been made available for us to do these projects. We've put it out to bid. We got the bids back. Came back, quite frankly, higher than what we would have liked, but we're all experiencing this issue of inflation. And so we have to deal with that. And as a result of the bids that we got back to do the actual work of replacing the water lines and the water service lines and the lead service lines, was more expensive than anticipated. So we had to take the gamble of saying, all right, we're not going to cancel one of these projects. There was a total of 5 projects contained in this $7 million. And we said, we're just going to put one of those projects back another 3 months and hope that we'll be able to get funding in the 2023 funding cycle. But we're going to move forward with the other 4 projects. And so all 4 of those projects were, the contractors were given their notice to proceed. So they are off and running. Our challenge, or the challenge for these contractors, well, I should say because we're all in this together. The contractors, in addition to the city, is that because of supply chain issues and pipeline issues, even though we've given them a notice to proceed, now they are able to order the materials on our tab And those materials are showing in some cases, 6 months time in order for those materials to be delivered. And so we are expecting, once those materials come in the June, maybe April, if we're lucky, time frame, they will actually be able to begin digging up our roads and replacing those big pipes, water mains, as we call them, throughout the roads, which gives us the added benefit of being able to improve the water system, the quality of the water system, the reliability of the system, but also gives us the opportunity to repave some of the roads that need it the most. And so we are um, anticipating that road work, now that they have received their notice to proceed, will begin sometime in the spring. The lead service line replacements, they received their notice to proceed, and they are anticipating being able to get to work within 3 to 4 weeks. And so that'll be focused in the Leahy area, beginning to replace the service lines on Leahy. And then, as you may recall, we were able to issue the contract award for the road work on Leahy, the Leahy project. And so after they go through and put in the lead service lines and do the demolition, excavation, road cutout in order to put those lines in, new lines from the house all the way to the water main on the north side of Leahy, then we will come behind them with the vendor, the contractor, who will reconstruct the road and then repave the road. So that way we are only cutting into the road once to put in the lead service line replacements, and then we will, while that is still open, continue to do the road reconstruction. And then once the road reconstruction is completed, which hopefully will be done before the winter, we'll come back in the spring and then put down the fresh coat of pavement, and be able to move forward with that. So those projects are underway. So you will begin to see some of that work throughout that area north of Hackley, Leahy Street. And so excited that that's moving forward. Our leak detection study, which was funded by a $100,000 so grant, it's about 50%. And why is the leak detection study important for us? Because it allows us to make our water filtration plant more effective and more efficient. At one point in time, we had a 50% water loss in our system. That means that we were producing twice as much water than we were actually selling. And so that is not a good ratio. For every two products you put on the shelf, that you put on the shelf that disappear off the shelf, you only get money for one. That's not a good ratio for staying for sustainability. And so now we are down around 30% water loss. Huge improvement over 50, but we want to get that number down to about 10%. And so the grant to do this leak study is going to help us identify points between the filtration plant and your front door, to identify those places where the water may be leaking in out of the system as opposed to getting directly to your house. And so with that grant, $100,000 or so grant, right now we're about 50% complete on our entire system. And so the next phase of that, which would be the balance of that 50%, will give us the data to allow us to then plan, design, and implement improvements on those leaks that have been identified in our system. Now, remember, we have a water system with pipes that are approaching 50, 60, 70 years old in some cases. So we have to anticipate that maintenance is going to be an issue. We need to anticipate replacing those pipes. And beyond the water system, the next level of what we have to begin to think about, and this, quite frankly, should have begun far before I came on board, was what we're going to do with the sanitary sewer system. Our sanitary sewer is now managed by a sewer authority. So that's not something that's in-house for the city. That is something that is done by this county-wide. It's not the county because it's a separate authority entity separate from the county. But this authority manages the collection of wastewater, the processing of it, the transmission of it, and the process and treatment of it. And they send us a bill for our portion of the region or area that they service. And we pay the bill to them for providing that service to us as a city. And so the piece that we have to be concerned about is the portion of the collection system that goes from the house to the mains. And so that area of the system is an area that is, again, 70 some odd years old. And although there's not a lot of stress on the system, it's all gravity feed. Anything that's 70 years old, you have to pay attention to it, and you have to be concerned about it. And so those are the laterals are going to be an issue, and then also some of the mains, the main collection system, that has to be addressed. And although that is a challenge for us, it is also an opportunity for us as well. And so hopefully we will be able to leverage the infrastructure funding to be able um, to get funding to be able to address both of those issues. So what else is underway? Another grant project, the industrial parks. Again, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to do a study of our industrial parks, to look at the infrastructure that we have in our industrial areas. We have one on the east side and we have one on the west side. The one on the west side is much more clearly defined. The industrial park on the east side, not so much. And so part of what this study is intended to do is to better focus the geographical limitations of the industrial parks, to define those, provide better signage, to look at the roads, the water and sewer system, electrical grid, communication system, and water system in those areas, and to see if they are adequate to really provide the type of resources that industrial customers are looking for. Because what we ultimately want to do is prepare ourselves in such a way that we can attract industrial customers to set up shop in our industrial parks. And so this study is a step in that direction. The product that we're looking for when it's all said and done from this study is to be able to say, all right, here is a marketing package that we can now take and go after those types of entities that really align with what they're trying to do, what they're trying to produce, with and aligned with the resources that we have available. We have labor, we have land, and hopefully we'll be able to say that we have the right infrastructure in place to be able to attract them, and water. So those types of industries that are water intensive, beverage industry, microbreweries, food processing, chip making, and you may not have realized that microchips require water in the process of their development. And so maybe that's a technology sector that we'll be able to attract and be able to set up a little microcosm of those industries that are associated with or benefit from those types of microelectronic devices. And so that grant is underway. They've had their kickoff meeting. The joint venture between the consultants and are working on that, identifying what businesses are there, looking in and doing research on what businesses would be interested in coming to Western Michigan, looking at the infrastructure, documenting that, and preparing a recommendation for how to move forward with getting those businesses and in those industrial partners here in Muskegon Heights. In addition to the industrial park grant that is underway, we have the USDA grant that is focused on putting together a downtown development plan. The consultant on that was Smith Group, who also helped us with our visioning plan. $100,000 or so again to be able to do the design work for our downtown area as part of the DDA, and that includes Rowan Park, that includes Broadway, and that also includes the Peck area, primarily. That area of our core downtown section is what they're focused on, developing an architectural concept of what that would look, and we've already got bits and pieces of that from the vision plan, but also developing the projects that not, when I say projects, developing the construction documents and bid package to allow us to go out and solicit the actual vendors who will do the construction work for the reconfiguration of the park, for the installation of the splash pad, for the entrapment of the this bronze sculpture that is being donated from the arts committee. All those things, they will help us, will provide us with the documentation that we can then go out and seek the contractors to do the work and get pricing on it. And the beautiful thing about this USDA grant, if I've got the name correct, it's either USDA or it is economic development, U.S. economic development grant. Is that there's two parts to it. One, you put together the plan and the documents, then you go out to bid, get the pricing, and then there's a grant to actually do the work. And so we're excited about being in the entering into being in the first step of that process, which is the design and planning, knowing that it gives us a good shot to be able to receive the funding under the second step of that. And so all these things are coming together to create that synergy around stuff that's happening in Muskegon Heights. It is refreshing that we consistently get great coverage from the media about the things that folks in our community are doing. For instance, I mean, 8th Street Park, that was an amazing cleanup. The day of caring that United Way did. And it wasn't only 8th Street Park, it was also Johnny O'Hara's Park and a few other areas that was spearheaded by United Way as part of their Day of Caring. I mean, we had Lake Hawks in Flight, we had United Way, of course, Consumers Energy, we had Home Depot, the CDC was out, the neighborhood associations were out, a number of other organizations, and I apologize if I missed them. I think Black professionals were there as well that participated in beautifying all of these locations in Muskegon Heights. And it's heartening to see our folks, residents, community members, longtime stakeholders in our community working side by side with people who have a heart and care for community in general, that are willing and interested in being part of the renaissance that's coming to Muskegon Heights. And I love to use that word renaissance. So that somebody the other day used the term gentrification in addressing council. Gentrification is not a bad thing. It is the displacement that is usually associated with gentrification. You've heard me say that many times on this show. But in order to get away from the negative connotations of gentrification, that's why we're choosing to use the term renaissance. Because as I've said before, the renaissance is coming to Muskegon Heights, whether we like it or not, because the value is there. The question is, who's going to be here to benefit from it? And the work that the mayor and the council are doing in collaboration with the staff and administration is intentional to make sure that the stakeholders who have bled, sweat, and shed tears in Muskegon Heights are going to be the ones that actually are here to benefit from the Renaissance. And that's why the housing development program, the lot sales program, the neighborhood stabilization program are all designed to reinvest in our community. They're designed to transition people from renting to owning. They're designed to improve, help people improve their credit scores. And you don't have to have perfect credit. You know, there's a rumor out there that, you know, in order to qualify for these homes, that you have to have perfect credit. And that's not the case. But realizing that not everybody's credit is perfect, part of what we are requiring the developers to do in developing these houses is to bring along access to programming that specifically will help you improve your credit, will help you address issues on your credit so that you have the best possibility to get the lowest interest rate when you apply for financing in order to be able to purchase these homes. So if somebody's out there saying you need to have perfect credit and in Muskegon Heights you don't have it, and so it's a joke and that's all nonsense. Don't listen to that because we understand the challenges, and what we're doing is strategic and smart around the idea of how we can work with the longtime standing members of this community to be able to help them transition from being stuck in a renting situation where they might be renting for $1,200, $1,300 a month, and they could be buying a house for $800, $900 a month, where that money is now going into the value of their home as opposed to into somebody else's pocket or into paying somebody else's mortgage. And so yes, you got to have credit, but we are preparing the processes in order to make sure that the folks from our community do have access to credit repair so that they're in the best possible position to be able to get the best possible deal when they purchase these homes. So this is all about reinvestment in the community. It's all about making sure that our first steps are always to take care of creating the best possible opportunity for people to benefit from the Renaissance in Muskegon Heights. And so, to that point, I want to segue and talk about the housing auction. And so, yes, today is Wednesday, and this is the 2 p.m. show of Reaching New Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. And so, I am excited to be able to share with you that we had our second annual auction. The county foreclosed due to delinquent taxes on 34 properties that are located in Muskegon Heights. That's 34 properties that were located in the Heights. And of those 34 properties, there were 11. Well, let me back up and say that of the 34 properties, we as a city, based on statute, had the right to exercise the first right, what they call the first right of refusal. Now, technically, our position on that list is after the state. The state gets to say, okay, the county's foreclosing on these properties. And so as a result, if we want them, we'll take them. And if the state does not take those properties, then it comes to the city to decide. And to go back and give you some history again, this is something that that the city has declined to do over previous years. I don't know, who to believe on how long ago it was, whether it was 10 years or 15 years, because I wasn't here when all that happened. All I can say is when I got here in January 2020, at least full time in January 2020, it was not the policy of the city to exercise their right of refusal. So, what happens when the city does not exercise that right of refusal? Then that land goes to the land bank that land goes to the Treasury's office, and the Treasury office has the right or opportunity to auction it. And when they auction it for the cost of the delinquent taxes and the delinquent fees and interest and such that are on the property, because they have already paid the city for all of those taxes over the last 3 years. And this is the county's opportunity when they auction it to recoup those monies that they have advance paid to the city, almost loaned to the city, if you want to look at it like that. If those properties do not sell on the first auction, then they go to a second auction a month or two later. And in that second auction, they auction them just to get the best price that they can get, regardless of whether that money covers the money that they have loaned the city. Now, whatever monies they receive there, They net it out of the money that they've already loaned the city versus the money that they've recouped. And then if the money that they've recouped through this auction process is less than the money that they've already loaned the city, they send the city a bill for that property, for the difference for those properties. So we end up paying back whatever the county loaned us if those properties don't sell at the first auction or at the second auction. So let's say, for instance, they don't sell at the second auction. They receive no money. So those properties now, by law, come to the city unless the city rejects those properties. Now, if the city rejects those properties go back to the county, and the land bank then takes responsibility for those properties. And then the land bank, it's their job and responsibility to take care of those properties and then to market them so that they can be sold and put back on the tax rolls in Muskegon Heights, in every city that they work with, but specifically for Muskegon Heights. So that is the process that has been taking place for years. What we have done in the last 2 years, which I'm so excited to talk about, if you can't tell, is that instead of letting those properties go back to the county so that they can auction them, we have put together a process where we exercise our first right of refusal on specific properties and take those properties so that we can make them available to the residents of Muskegon Heights first, so that if you live in Muskegon Heights or if you have a business in Muskegon Heights, you get the opportunity to bid on those properties. And you're not bidding against people from California or from outside of Muskegon Heights or Muskegon County or the state of Michigan, even. You are seeking to acquire those properties um, only in competition with other people who are residents of Muskegon Heights. And so, to all the listeners out there that are listening to this show today, um, this is groundbreaking because now, instead of giving those properties back to the county so that they can distribute them through their process, we have figured out a way without costing the city money per se to be able to make those properties available to the residents in an auction process. Now, if those properties don't sell in the auction process, then there's a second round that we then make available to everybody. And so this year, there were 34 properties that were foreclosed due to taxes. The city staff identified 23 of those properties that we wanted to exercise the right of refusal. Um, Now, why didn't we take all 34? Now, 23 of them we took because some of them were vacant lots, and it didn't make sense for us to exercise the right of refusal on those vacant lots because more than likely they weren't going to go sell in the auction. And if they did sell in the auction, we benefit from that. If they don't sell in the auction, then 3 months later, we'll have the opportunity to get those properties back after the second auction. And in that case, we will pay for those properties when we get them back. Um, the other properties, some of them had claims on them, and based on the the interpretation of the court decision around how property auctions are handled by the state. I mean, by the state and by the county land banks. The interpretation says that if somebody puts a claim on a property that has been foreclosed due to delinquent taxes, that the taxing entity must collect double the assessed value of the property. And so for us to then take those properties, we would have had to pay the county double the assessed value. And that would have depleted the cash that we had available in order to purchase the rest of the properties. So strategically, we looked at those 34. We eliminated 4 of the vacant lots. So that left 30 properties. And of those 30 properties, 6 of them had liens on them or claims on them. So we rejected those. because of the high cost of obtaining those properties. So that left us with 24, and there was one property that was badly burned. Again, just like the vacant lot, if that property probably wasn't going to sell in the auction, and probably was going to come back to the city in three or 4 months, and we would be able to pay for it then, as opposed to paying for it now, if we chose to do that in 3 or 4 months. So now that left us with 23 properties. And of those 23 properties in the first round, we had 12 of them that received successful bids. So that's 12 properties that are going to people who are residents of Muskegon Heights or have a business in Muskegon Heights. And from those 12 properties, we received 94,000, approximately $94,000. I don't have the exact number in front of me, in bid amounts. And that was actually more than the amount that we had to pay the county for those properties. We had to write a check to the county for 87,000 and change, which included all the delinquent taxes and such, in addition to a processing fee for all 23 of those properties. So we were able to purchase those 23 properties for 87,000, and we received bids that allowed us to receive approximately $94,000 in cashier's checks. We expect that that total amount for those 12 properties will end up being about $104,000 altogether, which will allow us to pay for the delinquent taxes, the fees and interest. It will allow us to pay for the gap year taxes, which will the taxes that are assessed in 2022. Because when they foreclosed on the properties, they foreclosed on back taxes for 19, 20, and 21. The taxes for 22 had not yet been assessed. So in this process of foreclosing on the properties, and um, putting them to the first right of refusal, the current year is a year that's not accounted for. So the monies that we received in this process will allow us to pay for the taxes associated with those properties for the year 2022. In addition, it allowed us to recoup lost revenues, and so lost revenues associated with those properties, vacant building fees, and such. And so we are now able, based on the auction, number one, to help keep people in their properties as a priority. Number two, to make those properties available to residents of Muskegon Heights first. And number three, for those properties that weren't taken in the first auction, to be able to sell them in the second auction and reap the benefits for the city of Muskegon Heights in the second auction, which is county-wide, statewide, national, so on and so forth, and making those properties available for sale, um, uh, and giving people the opportunity to identify, realize, and participate in the value of the property in Muskegon Heights, with the proceeds going to the city of Muskegon Heights. So through these two processes, we're able to accomplish those priorities. Um, keeping people in their homes, making sure that residents have the first crack at the properties, and then taking control of our own destiny moving forward, and being able to replace the lost revenues of taxes, the lost revenues of all other fees and fines, and so on and so forth, that were not paid on those properties before they went into foreclosure. And so I'm excited about the fact that on the first round alone, we were able to cover the original costs associated with that. Even though those costs are going to be distributed to other funds and other areas, we knew, at least on the surface, that what we received back was more than what we paid out. Now, this year, what we did differently from last year, we did a few things differently, but I want to talk about one thing. We put into the budget that was approved by the city council $60,000 set aside to make sure that we had enough funds, or we had funds available, in order to purchase these properties from the land bank. Now, if you were paying close attention, you heard me say that we wrote a check to the county for 87,000. Our budget was 60,000. So by us being able to do this auction process in advance of us having to write that check to the county, that auction process that took bid proposals, proposals from people to purchase these properties, we were able to know before we went to the county and said we want these 23 properties, that at least 12 people wanted 12 of those 23 properties. And so the funds that we received from those 12 properties were gave us enough funds and then some to cover the gap between the 60,000 that we had budgeted and the $87,000 that we had to write the check for to the county. I said land bank before, but it's really the county treasurer's office. It only goes to the land bank if it doesn't sell in multiple foreclosures. I mean, in multiple auctions. And so that was the first round. And what I'm excited about again is to say in the second round, we were successful in the second round of selling 11 more of those. I'm sorry, not 11, but 7 more of those properties. So we had 11 left. And of those 11, 7 of those properties sold in the second round. And so um, that what I like about that is not only, are people realizing the value of property in Muskegon Heights, but they are also realizing um, the opportunity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I said 7, but it was actually 6 properties received bids in the second round. And some of those were still residents. So it's not like in the second round, it went to everybody outside of Muskegon Heights. Some of those that purchased in the second round were Muskegon Heights residents or they had businesses in Muskegon Heights. So there were actually two bites at the apple, one that was exclusive to Muskegon Heights folks, and a second one that was um, the um, the second round. And so, if you go out on our website, you'll see the whole bid packages out there, and it lays out all the dates. So the first round came to an end on August 22nd. I believe the second round started on August 29th, went for 2 weeks, and so that ended on the 12th, on Monday. And so you had to get your bid proposals in by noon on Monday, the 12th. And that allowed us to report to council at the council meeting, hey, we don't have all of these verified bids. The proposals are here and they still have to be vetted and verified. But we knew that we had at least bid proposals for 6 properties. And of the 6 properties, 5 of them were vetted because they had cashier's checks included. And the 6th property did not provide a cashier's check. As part of the process, you can either provide proof of funds by your bank account or by a cashier's check. And for those that won the bid or had the highest bid proposal on a property and only used a bank letter of credit or your bank statement, you have until tomorrow at 10 a.m. in order to provide that cashier's check. However, in the case of the 6th property, they did not follow the necessary rules and regulations in submitting their paperwork properly. So they were disqualified and we were able to validate the second bid proposal. And so all 6 of them have been validated now, and those results are available at the clerk's office and will be out on our website very soon. So if you have any questions about who won in the second round and for what properties, then please reach out to the clerk and she can provide that to you. So for those of you who are curious about what properties are still available, I did want to quickly run through those remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. That is 2202 Hoyt, 265 East Hovey, 2908 5th Street, 3104 5th Street, 3029 9th Street. No, I know, I went through that pretty fast, so I'll do it one more time, but, in either case, you can contact the clerk at City Hall, 231-733-8870, and she can provide you with that detailed information, and that will be published on our website, so you don't have to depend on me reading it off. You can go out to the website and see which properties are still available. So one last time from bottom to top, 3029 is the address on Ninth Street that is still available. 3104 Fifth Street, still available. Um, the address on the other address on Fifth Street is 2908 Fifth Street. On Hovey, we have 265 East Hovey. Again, that's 265 East Hovey. And then on Hoyt Street, we have 2202 Hoyt Street. And so that represents the remaining 5 properties out of the original 34. And of the 23 we selected, those are the 5 properties that are remaining. And so you can go out to our website and see the required minimum bid for those properties, and reach out to us if you are interested in purchasing those properties outside of the auction process, which has ended, and we can work with you on that. So I really want to emphasize what a huge accomplishment this is. Not for my staff, which they did a tremendous job in figuring out how all the details of this and pulling it together, and making sure that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, and that's a great thing. But I think it is something that is important to our community that has not been done, and from what I understand, has never been done in terms of doing an auction that provided those properties to be available to residents only. And so it has huge significance in my mind, because this is part of um, investing back in Muskegon Heights. This is part of how we re-engage in the self-determination of our community and our city, because land, as I was taught very, very early in the beginning, is something that God is not making any more of. And the understanding of how you handle that and how you work with that makes all the difference in the world in terms of creating access to wealth, prosperity, and then intergenerational wealth. And so, um, our ability to be able to do that, even on a small scale, we're talking about 34 properties, but that's 34, or at least 23 of those properties that would have gone to somebody else to determine for that other entity what happens to those properties. Um, so there's a question on here, which is about what is going to happen about the millage rates for current homeowners in Muskegon Heights. That's a question that council is going to have to wrestle with. But quite frankly, if you look at the formula that governs the way things get done, I don't know that that's a question that is um, that has viability at this time, because right now the city's in a structural deficit. We are under the weight of not only the school debt as residents, but also the millage associated with trying to run a city that is in a structural deficit per se. When I say structural, it's not in a technical deficit, but because of the fact that we are missing over 1,300 properties that should be part of our tax base. Right now we have 3,700, approximately 3,700 parcels that are on the tax rolls in Muskegon Heights. This community was really constructed based on the idea of having a minimum of 5,000 parcels that are part of the tax structure. Over the years, you've heard me say this time and time again, we've torn down, demolished, several hundreds of properties a year in order to address the issue of blight and condemnation based on the 2008 downturn. And um, that is left us with about 1,300 properties that we need as part of our tax base. The issue for us is we need to support every turn that we can, the opportunity um, to get those properties back on the tax rolls, and not just selling lots, but turning lots into fully developed properties with structures on them that are either commercial structures or residential structures. That brings them back into the tax base. And when we do that, then that allows us to spread the burden of running the basic services of the community across 5,000 parcels as opposed to across 3,700 parcels. So the weight that you're feeling now of the millage is really because we're supporting the city with 3,700 parcels that really needs to be supported by 5,000 parcels. So everything that we talk about needs to be centered around how do we create more economic and more development of these properties that are sitting vacant or empty. And that is the way that we bring the city back off of that structural deficit. Now, when we put those 5,000 parcels back into service, those 1,300 that are missing, that gives us the opportunity to begin to lower the millage on everybody else because now it's being shared across a larger base. And that means that everybody can pay less and still generate the same revenue. So, right now, in order to maintain the existing level of services, um, that equation is not going to include lowering the millage rate. And I know from a real estate standpoint, for real estate agents and for folks who are trying to market property in this community, that sometimes is daunting because when people go to buy a property, they look at what the taxes would look like, and that is a heavy lift for them. But if you have a heart for this community, you want to tap into the existing vibrant culture that we have here, that is part of the struggle that we have to engage in order to achieve what we want to achieve. And some people have said, we've had many conversations over the last 3 years that I've been here about the difficulties of embracing the renaissance that is coming for the people who live here. And it's a tough road. But I have said once, and I'll say it many times, that is what change looks like. The difficulties that we're dealing with, that is what change looks like. And so when we have conversations about, well, we can't do anything to build houses until we fix the roads, the reality of it is, our entire budget is less than $10 million, just under $10 million a year. That if we shut down the city and spent all of that $10 million on roads, it would take us at least 11 years to fix the roads. And so the reality that we have to face is we do not have the funding to be able to address the issue wholesale of the roads, full stop. So to believe that until we fix the roads, we can't do anything else is a false premise. And it does not lead us to a solution because unless there's somebody has a fairy godmother or wins the lottery and comes in with $110 million, that's not going to happen. The other alternative is to do a special millage. So we're already talking about how we can lower the millage. If we want to fix the roads, right now we have a 4 mil millage. And the problem with that 4 mil millage is that a vast majority of our property is exempt. And so that 4 mils is being taxed on a much lower tax basis based on the Headley Act, which says that the value is locked into increasing only according to the taxable value increases only according to the cost of living or inflation. We're not able to access the value of each of those properties that is going up in terms of assessed value, but it's not going up in terms of taxable value with that 4 mills. Plus, you have to realize there's 1,300 properties that we can assess those 4 mills, and we get 4 mills of zero, basically nothing coming out of those 1,300 or so vacant properties, vacant lots. And so, if we really want to assess a millage that will be able to put a dent in the roads, because the 4 mills brings in about $360,000 a year, we need something in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 mills. And so that is not reasonable either. So what we have to do is we have to buckle up, and we have to face the fact that our property has value, even though the roads are bad, even though we're not in a position to address the roads today. But because the properties have such upside, huge value, people are going to buy the houses when we build them. A house in Grand Rapids is $300,000 to $400,000, and that's 40 minutes away. You don't think people will buy a house for $200,000 and drive less than 2 miles on bad roads to be able to get to a highway to go to Grand Rapids? They will. That value is there, especially because you realize it puts them 5 minutes away from the beach. The value is there. And as we build the houses, we generate the revenue, we get it back on the tax roll, and that gives us the money to be able to pave our roads. And in the meantime, we're doing the things strategically that we can by using grants from the water initiative, freshwater drinking water initiatives, to be able to um, do the water pipe at the same time that we use those funds to be able to do roads. And that's where we are. So Ms. Aubrey is asking for a favor. The school system is at a negative point. Would you be available for an education roundtable? I absolutely would be. And as some of you know, I have over 12 years of experience in the education arena. I'm a former school superintendent. I ran a district that had 80 plus schools in it, total of 24,000 students and families. And it was by the time I left, it was a high performing school district. So I'm always interested and available to engage in conversations around how we can improve education in our community. In fact, the research that I'm doing for my dissertation is all about how city government can work with education systems in communities that are underserved or have structural deficits or are financially distressed, in improving the community. So I would love to be able to be part of that process. Let's see. Uh, we have an individual who is saying stop overpaying yourself. So, if you go and do a salary study, which we have done from time to time, you will see that the city of Muskegon Heights is on the bottom of the scale of compensation. So, we can always talk about what we think we know and so on and so forth, but the data itself speaks for itself. And the question we have is not so much about what people are being paid. The question is about what productivity we're able to generate out of the staff that we have. We have a bare minimum staff. We have a skeleton crew. Our staff is half the size it was in 2008. Police department is half the size. Public works is half the size. Fire department is half the size. And in order to be able to provide services and run the city, you have to have that staff. The alternative is an emergency manager. You get rid of all your staff and then you contract out for somebody else to be able to provide those services. The value of that is you get rid of the overhead associated with pensions and retirement. The downside of that is you lose control, you lose quality control. And so that's not a direction that I would think that we would want to go in. It wouldn't be my recommendation. And I've seen several cities go through that process and not come out better on the other side of it. And some people would argue, if you look at the emergency management process that our school district went through, that it did not come out of the emergency management process in a situation. I'm not going to say it was in a worse situation or that it was not better, but it was not in a position to be successful. And that's what we want to make sure. Whatever steps that we make, that they're intentional and strategic in setting up the community to be successful. Um, I don't know the answer to the next question. Please give information again for purchasing one of the available properties for Heights residents. So yes, please contact the clerk's office. Ms. Ross is the new clerk. You can reach us by dialing 231-733-8870. She can give you the details about what's available. It is not posted to our website, but I expect that it will be on our website, the list of available properties within the next day or two. And so you will be able to do that. Let's see. All right. So I'm not sure what this notion is that the city is overpaying, because that's not what the data suggests. If anybody has data that says to the contrary, I would be happy to review that data. So if that's something that you have facts on, please produce those facts, and I'm happy to review it and take a look at it and see what we can do about it. But the reality still remains that we're on a skeleton staff. And so being able to run a city and the community and provide services is difficult when you don't have the staff available. And so a large portion of our budget is, in fact, salaries and wages, as well as the retirement funds. But that does not in any way suggest that the individuals that are part of that are overpaid. In any community, salaries and wages are the largest portion, and even in a business, labor is the largest, typically the largest portion of your budget. And so that doesn't mean anything. The fact that the percentage of the budget, when you want to talk about whether somebody is paid more or less than what they should be getting paid, then that is looking at what their job is, what their job function is, and comparing it to what other people are paid or compensated for doing the same type of job or function. And that is, the parameter or the metric that you use to assess whether or not people are being paid adequately. Now, going back to the issue of what portion of it is of our budget, what that also suggests is that the rest of our budget is tiny, that we are not spending. We don't have available the funds to spend on other things outside of labor, and that's the difficult part. The alternative is not so much to cut the salaries of the people that are here. The alternative is, because people are being adequately compensated according to the salary schedule and study. The alternative is to talk about cutting staff positions. And so, um, if we talk about cutting staff positions, then you're going to also degrade the quality of service that you already have. So thank you for participating in today's show. We're at 3:04. Unfortunately, we weren't able to be joined by the representative about the $11.4 million grant that I wanted to talk about. So hopefully we will be able to get her on board for a future session. I will be out of town for the next segment of Reaching New Heights, but I am hopeful that I will be able to remote in and still be able to do the show. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully that will go well, and that way we'll be able to connect and get together. So I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you for tuning in to Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, the city manager, city of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. So stay tuned and be blessed.